Howdy and yeehaw, back with the Bourbon Lens tonight, and you may get where we're headed tonight. We're headed down to Texas. That's right. Get your cowboy boots on. We're headed to the Stampede and the Rodeo with Balcones. Today we are joined with Gabe RiCharde, Director of Spirits for Balcones. So thank you, Gabe, for joining Scott and I this evening on the eve of Bourbon Heritage Month.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
happy to be here.
I got through it without laughing. I primed the boys that I may laugh, I may giggle and have to do a few takes, but did it in one. I'm proud of myself.
No, that was good. Lean into it.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to be about it, be about it.
I had to put myself on mute for that one.
Yeah, you were probably like this idiot. So, they say everything's bigger in Texas and everything, don't mess with Texas. But is it really hotter in Texas right now than it is in Kentucky? Because it's cooling down up here. How's the weather down in Texas?
We just got rain for the first time in a while. And so, I went for a run today and then just got soaked. So yeah, it's high this evening. The high was in the high 80s, but we had over 100, maybe 110 days with no rain, 120 days with no rain in Central Texas. And we had probably, 60 days in a row where the high went over 100. It was miserable.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you're a runner, that would be conducive to sweating out all the alcohol consumption.
Well, of course.
Yeah. You got to find the balance, right? What does one do outside of work when it's 110 or 105 like every day?
Find the next air conditioned space, basically. Like that's the only game there is to play. It's miserable, man. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely get that. I tried to avoid Texas in the summer months when I have to travel for work. I try to make it like October, April, and somewhere in those months in between and not mess with summer because it's rough.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. I know it's a busy time. Balcones is gearing up for some really big stuff happening in the month of September, and we're going to drop this right on the verge of Bourbon Heritage Month, and the calendar will turn to September during the podcast week drop. So we're excited to have you and talk about your all's whiskey. So when we say the word Bourbon Heritage Month and in Texas, like what does that mean to you all at Balcones, and just kind of what's that mean to represent Texas in a way, being one of the most well-known brands out of that state?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, yeah, we typically save any special release bourbons for the month of September. We've kind of had a brief history since 2018, our 10-year anniversary of releasing a wheated bourbon mash bill that's distillery only, and then a high rye bourbon, which just went to market for the first time last year. We've done a blue corn bourbon, I think, since 2015. But yeah, I mean, we definitely try to make the month very bourbon centric. This year, we'll be releasing a blue corn bourbon variant that's wine finished. It's a 4-year BCB, but it's finished in, we'll taste it actually later. It's finished in large format, extra large format. So 500 liter puncheons from Washington to California, some Grenache and cab casks. So yeah, we try to do a spin on bourbon and center it for that month and talk a little bit about how our process is a little different than bourbon that you may know, and kind of try to champion it. But yeah, no, we'll definitely try to do that more. We'll have a late release in the month of that BCB wine finish.
No, I think that is exciting, and I'm excited to try that and lean into the samples that you all were gracious enough to send us for the podcast. So, one of the questions I would ask, and we've talked to some other Texan people like Nico and some folks like that, but what would you say to someone that's trying Texas bourbon for the first time? A lot of the times when we bring up Texas, people are like, not for me. And because they think they're going to get Kentucky or Indiana or Tennessee style whiskey and bourbon with very different climates and different distillation processes for that matter. So what's your kind of say to that when you're trying to convert a Kentuckian or an Indianian or a Tennessean to Texas whiskey?
The biggest obvious difference between those two, the Texas and then the East Coast, kind of traditional classic American whiskey producing regions, is the climate.
Yeah.
But the climate, I mean, you can use that a little bit as an excuse. The climate only goes so far, right? And really what ends up happening is the Texan whiskey maker's response to the climate ends up actually making a whiskey that's a little different. You have to take the climate into account. You have to partner with it like a dance partner. You got to step with it, But in doing so and understanding the tenacity and the intensity of the climate, you also have to make production decisions that is fundamentally going to make a different whiskey. If you started with Indiana and Kentucky casks, 6-month yard aging, very coarse oak with not a lot of extractives, a simple char, if you started that way and tried to do that in Texas on a 24, 30, 36-inch column, you would get something that's not quite as recognizable to an Indiana or Kentucky, bourbon drinker. And so I think kind of, explaining that this is a nascent community that is, we're not maintaining a tradition that already exists. We're trying to make our own tradition and kind of, exploring and trying to discover a tradition. And it's a little, I mean, in the same way that like, I wouldn't want to taste Illinois or Indiana bourbon from, I don't know, 1830, So you kind of have to cut a little bit of slack and go, like we're figuring this out. We're cutting our teeth. We're partnering with this new area, region. And so, it's not going to be, and just make it okay for it not to be for everyone. I mean, I think we're honest with ourselves and like, I've got Old Forester, I've got Buffalo Trace on my shelf. I'm very happy with classic bourbons when I want something different. And when I want something that's a little bit more bold, I'll reach for a Texas bourbon.
Yeah. So like, that's the one thing I've noticed, and I've just had the traditional pot still poured in the glass and kind of just drinking as we talked. And Scott would love, for you to chime in, but the big difference that I get is the finish versus anything else. Like, the nose and the caramel and the vanillins and like all of that, like traditional notes and sweetness are there. And you get a little funkiness with pot still with distillation, right? Like that's expected. Go see your favorite pot still distillation, whoever that is, to notice that funkiness, whether it's, Starlight on a smaller scale or, looking at Woodford, what they're doing and so on and so forth. But the finish is the difference for me in the whole concept of nose, palate, finish. I think that's what's standing out to me the most in just the traditional pot still bourbon. Scott, I don't know what your thoughts are, just kind of right off the bat.
Yeah, definitely get that pot still like funk that we like to. That's what we call it, I guess. I definitely get that, but there's a lot more like fruit. It's kind of like buried under. Like the nose to me is like vanilla. It's just super vanilla. And then it also has like a little like grape candy smell, like almost definitely like little grape pixie sticks almost. I don't know, like, but then when you get into the taste, it's just like fruit just pops out of the glass. And at a good proof point, I mean, what are we at? 92 proof? Yeah, I mean, it's not what I expected going in, when they say like Texas whiskey is bold as shit. It's like this is mellow and it seems very balanced.
Yeah. Well, so just I get like a little corn chip on the back, like that. Is that to be expected? Like from just like end finish, like that was the note that just kind of stuck out to me. It feels like I just like I drank the whiskey, I liked it, and then I ate a Tostitos chip at the end.
Yeah, no, I think, a lot of that, there's kind of multifaceted here. I mean, you're touching on the fruit. That's a little bit connected to what sets Balcones apart from maybe another Texas whiskey producer or another bourbon producer, is that we kind of designed our facility. We got into this for malt, for American style malt. We just adore malt. We think it's so expressive. We really think our expertise is there. Bourbon kind of keeps the lights on and is kind of like a way to meet America where they're at instead of forcing them to come to us, But our facility was designed with 2 production streams in mind. And so we do a pot distillation. Everything kind of is centered there. But we have a cereal cooker. We have open fermentations, even though they're tall stainless steel vessels, they're open to the environment. They're drawing in, the air, the Waco air. And so when we decided to really kind of point some of our production towards bourbon. We didn't go, okay, well, let's get a bourbon yeast in-house and let's shorten the fermentation to 72 hours and let's run it really different on our pot stills and let's put it into totally different barrels. We just went, okay, we'll just do bourbon, but in the way that we've been doing malt, and so this bourbon is getting M1, a Scotch malt whiskey yeast, and English ale yeast, SO4. So that's where some of that funkiness is coming in. That SO4 yeast produces a lot of fusels. It's very oily. It's very rich and funky. It produces that kind of Scotchy flavor. And we do a long 7+ day fermentation where we get a ton of acidity. So to anyone else, to Four Roses or to Maker's Mark, they'd be like, you ruined it. But to us, it's like, well, yeah, all of our other whiskeys are on a 7-day schedule. So we're not going to change it for bourbon. So you get a lot of lactobacillus and a lot of other bacteria that are creating organic acids, and that leads to all the kind of stone fruit and orchard fruit flavor that you're getting in there. And so that's a little bit of our personality is, we did something similar with rum when we first started making rum just for fun in 2012. Was like, well, we're just going to make rum how we make whiskey, and for better or for worse, this is what it produced. But yeah, so that's a little bit, the fruit, the funkiness, the pot distillation. 92 proof is as low as we can go on a pot distilled product, or else we'll develop a haze in the bottle because those will clump together. The solvency, like power of the alcohol, won't be strong enough to keep the lipids separate. So all those kind of points that you guys are touching on are just because our production stream.
7-day fermentation.
It used to be 9 and we shortened it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, it tastes like lemonade. When it's got, even the bourbon, it tastes like lemonade when it's going into the still. I mean, it's very acidic. There's a lot of precursors and esters that already were formed, but also a lot of organic acids that will create esters further in maturation. So it's a funky, fruity, funny little beast for sure. It definitely, and I didn't even touch on the raw ingredients. We're using the roasted blue corn that we kind of became known for with Baby Blue, True Blue 100, and Brimstone. We decided to really go whole hog in a bourbon, and we just reached for the ingredient that we were most familiar with. Okay, we'll use this heirloom Flint roasted blue corn. We'll add a little Texas wheat. We'll add malted barley. But we're not going to go, and try to reinvent the wheel. We know this grain. And because of that, you get this very rich, you mentioned tortilla chip. You get like tortilla and masa and these really rich flavors from that.
Well, and the fact that it does have some wheated aspects like that garners to a lot of the sweetness and like the cereal sweetness on the nose, right? The vanilla, cinnamon, sugar type notes that are there. And there's some butteriness to it. My palate's evolved from the first time I had this, because I'm going to be really 100% honest with you. The first time I had it, I was like, ugh. But like my palate's
Me
evolved.
too, bro. Me too, Jake.
Well, and like, that's why I was like, okay, I'm interested, because it's been a while. Like it's been three years since I had it for the first time. And like, I feel like everyone needs to give everything a second shot at least once. And in bourbon, like I give people 3 and 5 shots, because like oxidation and different things happen over time. But it's hard to depict this in speech form, but it's velvety. Like that's the word I would use. Like creamy is another word. Like that's the one thing I really like about is the mouth feel on this is really big. And that it's oily, and those are the things I like in bourbon a ton. And so like, that's what I really appreciate about the whiskey.
Sure. Yeah. I think one other element to touch on, you're talking about the velvetiness and the oiliness, and you're kind of alluding to like, there's a body there that comes from the pot distillation. It's retaining a lot of those lipids. We're not chill filtering. We're doing a very coarse 40 micron filter, fiberglass filter, just to catch like char from the barrel trough. But another thing too is that, which is kind of a part connected to this, is that this is a $29.99 bourbon, which again to us is like our goal was like, hey, we want to make a bourbon to like introduce people to our brand, and introduce people to Texas whiskey. And there wasn't a Texas whiskey on the market that was grain to glass and was straight at this price point. And we never really got into whiskey to make unattainable $100 plus releases that our friends and families in Waco, with a very low median income couldn't afford. And so we thought, okay, well, let's make something that's more approachable. We can afford to do this. And in doing so, when we blended this and we originally ideated this, we actually had panels in the room that I'm in now, the blending room, where we had we mixed it with Mexican cola, and we had Garrison Brothers and Treaty Oak, and we had Buffalo Trace and Wild Turkey out. We were like, okay, let's see how we compare versus these ones that are already in the market when it's mixed in a whiskey sour or on Coke, because that's how this is going to be applied. And we were kind of trying to be honest with ourselves about the application, which we never really done before. But I think that's also a part of its strength too, is that because of those oils, because of those lipids, it stands out really well in a cocktail. It does really stand up to mixing. It stands up to other ingredients. So yeah, it's hard because people want to throw it in a Glencairn and then go, oh man, is this as good as something I paid $60 for? And it's like, no, no, that's why it's not $60.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a really cool exercise for us to actually, this was the first time we were designing something that was intended to be on-premise play, and hey, we want people to put this in cocktails. We want to get on bars. Yeah. We think that's really exciting, and we want it to stand up. And when it's in a cocktail, we want people to go, oh, what is this? Instead of just, a mixing alcohol, basically.
Well, and I think that's a really unique approach. So many times, people just go and source and they're creating whatever whiskey to just get out and go before they get their product up, and then it switches over and they're only shooting for mass distribution. But making a specific product, knowing hey, we're really good at this single malt thing, but B, saying this bourbon thing's kind of a big deal. So let's play in a lane that we believe is unique, right? And going on premise and becoming a cocktail whiskey, and saying, hey, we don't have to live up to be the next Maker's Mark or whatever. We're just going to be Balcones bourbon, pot still bourbon. So I think that's something that people have a misconception that you all are out there to knock off any Heaven Hill product.
Yeah, we're trying to be the next Weller 12. It's get out. What? No, who the fuck would try to do that? That's ridiculous, Yeah. It's but because of the price points in craft, that's the comparisons that are made. It's I paid $90 for this bottle. Well, I could have got 3 bottles of this other one that I love for it. And because of that, I hate it. And so we were definitely seeing that game play out in craft and going, you can see it not just across bourbon too. We released in 2020, a $39.99 American single malt. Yeah. Because we were recognizing this game that was happening where someone spends $60, $70, $80 on American single malt and goes, shit, I could have bought a 16-year-old scotch for this. And we're okay, well, we're going to meet you where you're at, and we're going to release a 3 to 5-year-old $40 American single malt.
Yeah.
Because you're right. You're right. You shouldn't be paying $80 for a totally untested category. You are correct. And so meeting kind of people where their wallets are and where just the reality of the market is.
Yeah. I know this is about bourbon, but I'm really pumped because I've heard multiple times about Balcones does bourbon, but Balcones really does American single malt really well. So I have a bottle of Lineage somewhere around here, and I'm going to crack that open soon because just retrying this is getting me excited for what the stills are meant to do, quote unquote, to see hey, let's see this at its full capacity. It's like Goku at regular Saiyan versus Goku at Super Saiyan. That's a millennial reference if I've ever had one.
I hope that's your demographic.
I don't know. Scott is our graphic millennials. Is our demo millennials?
I don't even know what millennial means anymore.
Hey,
somebody told me I was a millennial, and I said okay, but whatever.
Did you get the reference though? That's the test.
No.
Oh, you never watched Dragon Ball Z? That's sad.
No.
And next time,
but I know
Dragon Ball Z
anime and stuff is getting a lot bigger. Yeah.
Oh, and it's always been huge, just not in America.
Well, now it is though.
Yeah.
Now it's growing like crazy.
So this is going to be a hard left turn here. So we're going to keep going on with the theme of the whiskey and Bourbon Heritage Month. You're gracious enough to send us some experimental things and things that may be coming out soon. And we laid out this tasting with you before we got going here. And so the next one is this WHY. I would just say why. But you said WHY, so I think that was really specific of you to say it that way. So walk us through what this, new cask, new idea is, and this is young. You said you're going to walk us through that whole idea. So our listeners are going to get walk through it as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, I mean, we're just coming off a pot still bourbon. We're kind of giving a little bit of the background of, we reached for grains that were familiar to us. So roasted blue corn, Texas wheat, and then actually the initial rounds of pot still bourbon were made with Golden Promise malted barley because that was just the barley that we had on hand. We're like, okay, we're laying down malted barley. Let's use this super expensive, like almost $1 a pound malted barley instead of like a cheaper 2-row or 6-row. Anyways, so we've done that for a couple of years, but really, I think with the development of pot still bourbon, we found ourselves just going like, man, it'd be great if we could take our time, and if this could taste a little bit more like the bourbons that we love, because ultimately I think as we recognize our strengths, we're recognizing that we're not in bourbon to change the face of American bourbon. I went to Kentucky. I went to University of Kentucky.
Go Cats.
UK. I was a poor grad student. I went on free tours to Buffalo Trace and Wild Turkey and Four Roses, because that was the only place I could get 3 ounces of alcohol on a weekend, for free. And really fell in love with American style whiskey. And so I think as PSB kind of developed and we kind of recognized, I don't know if the roasted blue corn thing is connecting as strongly in this bourbon mash bill as it did in Baby Blue in our corn portfolio with a little less oak impact. We kind of went back to the drawing board and we've been playing around for a long time. But anyways, long story short, what you have in front of you, this WHY, is a 100% Texas grain yellow corn wheated bourbon mash bill that was sour mashed and put into extra large format New American oak cask. So 500 liter New American oak cask, very simple toast. We kind of went back to the drawing board and redeveloped some toasts with our cooperage to minimize this really heavy oak character that we've kind of had to do because our evaporative loss in Texas is so dramatic in these standard size casks. But in a 500 liter cask, we can dramatically, maybe even cut in half our evaporative loss. So this actually gives us the time. I kind of alluded to this, that the really iconic thing about Texas whiskey is the climate, but it's how you respond to the climate,
Yeah.
And I think Texas whiskey makers, because they've been experiencing evaporative loss of 8 to 12.5% a year, they have to product out. Their product is rapidly evaporating and leaving their warehouses. And so they're designing these production streams that make use of these products in a very short amount of time. And to do that, you need to add a lot of tannin and a lot of sugar and a lot of character to this whiskey in a short period of time while you still have juice in the barrel.
Yeah.
But in these large format casks, we can kind of step back and slow down. And so that's kind of the idea behind this, is this is a whiskey that at 15 months in Texas shouldn't taste like a finished whiskey. It shouldn't taste like, we could release this in 9 months. It should taste like, that needs another 4 to 5 years in barrel. And because we're using these large casks, we're actually able to kind of peer through time and do that. So yeah, I wanted to share this with you because I think it's indicative of a lighter toast. So not much barrel influence because of the lighter toast, but also that toast is balanced over a much larger volume of spirit too. The wood to liquid ratio is different from those standard size casks. So yeah, just to kind of show that, this is something that has been in our warehouse for 15 months and it kind of tastes like something that we won't release for a really long time.
Yeah.
Which for us is new. Baby Blue used to have a 6-month age statement. Our Texas One Single Malt used to have a 15-month age statement. When we first released our rye, it had a 15-month age statement. We could put something into this very extra fine grain, high extractive, custom toasted barrel that would just load extractives into it in a very brief amount of time. And we'd have a ready whiskey, right? But now that we're maturing and all of our stuff in warehouse is maturing, we're going what would it look like to have an 8 to 12? Our idea for this is that maybe one day some of these casks could actually get to 8, 10, 12 years old, and we'd actually have liquid left in barrel, which to date, really, in virgin oak, anything beyond 6, 7 years, it's all evaporated for us. It's gone. So
you said you're seeing about 15% loss in standard size.
No, it's 8 to 12 and a half. It really depends. It depends. It's closer to 8 if you aggregated all of our data. It's closer to 8% per year. So it's not as exaggerated as you get from some other sources where it's we're getting 15% evaporation per year, and that's why we have to sell this whiskey when it's 1 year old. it's not quite as dramatic. It's not double Kentucky, but it's like, 60% more than Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if this isn't butterscotch, like right on the nose, like butterscotch and like Werther's original kind of like thing going on. And then you drink it and it's already got like, it's got some corn sweetness, which I'm sure Scott is loving. But like the mouthfeel is already starting to be there for it being so young. And there's not a ton of ethanol on it.
Yeah, so this is also, I failed to mention this. So this is, again, I mentioned it's 100% Texas grain, but this is yellow corn too.
Yeah.
So this is yellow corn. It's 51% yellow corn. It's, crap, I always get these wrong. 51% yellow corn. It's like 37% wheat, and then it's 12% Texas malted barley. It's Texas soft red winter wheat, and then it's Texas malted barley. It's a pale malt, the same malt we use in Lineage for our Texas malted barley malt.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was another departure too, is going like, okay, instead of these flinty, very nutty, very earthy flavors from a roasted blue corn, what would happen if we just played with something a little more classic? Like I'm glad we did what we did, and I am proud to be at Balcones. We started with roasted blue corn, but it is you can't really knock something till you've tried it, So we're like, okay, well, you can't like poo like a yellow corn until you actually like try to mess with it on your stills, So yeah, that's wanted y'all to taste that just to show you kind of what's indicative of the future. Hopefully we'll be actually blending in some of this stock into PSB starting this coming summer. So next summer, on June next year, some of this stock will actually start to thin out. Well, not thin out, but just kind of add to PSB, thin out some of the really heavy oak character and the nuttiness and the roasted blue corn character. And we'll try to bring in some of these more classic, softer butterscotch, sweeter notes. So yeah, I want to give you just a little preview.
No, I think this is going to give you that's something to play with. That can be a rounding agent, whether it's like 5, 10, 12, 13, 14%. It might not be a ton, right? Like it's just going to be enough to give you that sweetness and that edge to take off on like that blue chip corn. And this can give you more of a traditional, like lingering oaky, butterscotchy, vanilla mouthfeel on the back end, like from the finish perspective. Like that's what I'll be excited about, is seeing with this blend to see what the finish changes, because that's where I got the corn chip was at the end. It wasn't even anywhere else.
Scott, you've been awfully quiet. What do you think?
I just think this is Scott's favorite whiskey he's ever drank.
Hashtag winning.
It really does highlight like the distillate. Like you get that it's a corn based bourbon. You get that it's a corn whiskey. Yeah, and I think Jake, he always like pegs me whenever it tastes like corn. He's like, "That's Scott's favorite whiskey." So, but yeah, I mean, for 15 months, I mean, it's pretty incredible. But 500-liter cask, if I'm doing math right, that's like what, 150 gallons or so.
It's like 132, I think, gallons. Yeah, 3.785.
So like it's 2.5 times.
It's like 2.25 the size of our standard casks are 225s. So, that would be large format to other producers. But when we moved from our 20 liters, our 5 gallons, into standard size casks, we moved to 225s. So we've been on 225 liters because of that edge on a lot of other reasons, but partially because of that edge on evaporative loss. You get a little less evaporative loss in a 225 than you do in a 200.
And this is just a nerd question, like from a ricking perspective, are you palletized? Are you ricked? Like, what's that look like?
We're ripped. Yeah. We have kind of, so about 15-20% of our storage is on site in our historic building. Mm-hmm. And that's like our R&D stuff, single barrels, special releases. We just keep those close on hand. And then the rest is off site, about 15 minutes north of town. And it's kind of further out in the country, but they're Kentucky style rick houses. So they're like aluminum clad or like metal siding, and then like just wooden ricks inside.
Oh, sweet. Yeah. I know it's really popular, like in more craft distillation nowadays, to do palletization. So I didn't know if that had been adopted, and there's somebody in Texas, I think, that's burying barrels. I heard the other day. So they're trying to keep it cooler.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, people do all kinds of stuff, man. Yeah, some people wet their
dig a big hole and find oil.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And then you pissed off Jerry Jones.
Right. We're rich.
So I was reading an article on Balcones in prep for this episode, and it was trying to explain mash bills.
Mhm.
Now in Kentucky, we have mash bills where we, blend the mash and cook the mash and let it ride and let it ferment. Now you guys do something totally different, the grains and making separate whiskeys, right? And that's how
Yeah.
you create your mash or mash
Yeah.
bill.
Yeah, for pot still bourbon, yeah, you're right. Oh, I know we didn't quite get into this. I was afraid I'd overcomplicate things because I've already run my mouth so much. But with pot still bourbon, this is. It kind of sounds like, oh yeah, we have this really innovative approach. We do this super cool thing. When in reality, it's just when we decided to make pot still bourbon, we had 4 bourbon mash bills like kind of sitting around. We had 100% roasted blue corn, wheated bourbon. And then we had a high rye bourbon and a high malt bourbon. So when we sat down to make PSB, pot still bourbon, and we were kind of forecasting how we would make it through the next couple of years in the stocks that we had, we kind of ended up, and we had the blending samples out too. We kind of ended up making it as an amalgamation between these 4 mash bills. And so that's the other, that's the other reason why we have this other mash bill. Y'all are looking at WHY, the wheated bourbon with yellow corn. Is because we're messing with all these mash bills and we're having to lay down all these distinct mash bills, and the proportions are changing based on the seasonality of the cask and how we blend it and all that. And so we're kind of going, yeah, like we need to tighten this up. Like there's a lot of mash bills. And it's honestly worked for a while. It's been a really good blending tool because we can go, okay, we're going to get nuttiness and body from the blue corn, and we're going to get the sweetness from the wheat, and we're going to get a little chocolate and spice from the rye, and from the malt we'll get fruit. And so it's been kind of nice to be able to blend that way. It'll be harder to do blending once we just have one bill. But anyways, yeah, you're right. It is kind of a weird thing. It means that the mash bill for PSB is constantly kind of migrating a little bit too. So people often ask us, oh, what's the mash bill? And it's like, well, the last one was 70%.
A little bit of this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
that's very interesting. I'm sure it makes your job as director of spirits, keeping track of everything in the rick house, probably very, very difficult.
It's fun. It's great. I love my job.
So this is bad of me, but like, how did you get into whiskey?
Oh, I mean, I think I started talking about it.
Yeah, you said you went on some tours and just started drinking whiskey because you were a broke college student.
Yeah, I was a broke graduate student. I was, living off of like $1 stipend a month, and I was poor. So yeah, that was the whiskey. But I got into, and I'll make this brief, but like all distillers, I went to a dry private Christian college where I wasn't allowed to drink at all. And so naturally I was home brewing, mead and really bad amber ales in my basement during that time. And kind of one thing led to another. I went to grad school. When I was there, I continued home brewing, and I was studying geochemistry at University of Kentucky. And that was really fun. But yeah, I was poor. So I would go on all these distillery tours, which is great. I get a lot of free alcohol that way. And then I ended up working overseas in oil and gas for about 4 or 5 years. And when I was getting out of that, I was thinking like, man, I mean, I was kind of an idiot. I was living in Spain, and I was like really getting into like American bourbons, So I was like going to like the Spanish supermercados and seeing if they had like Wild Turkey, or seeing if they had like really, Four Roses, the batch, really cheap Four Roses with the screw top. And I was really getting into American whiskeys then. Now I wasn't drinking like sherry and Spanish wine, which I should have been. But anyway, now I'm like when I was getting out of it, I was living in Berlin, Germany, and I was thinking, oh man, it'd be really fun to get back into this. Like I'm kind of, it was a downturn in the oil and gas industry. And I just started like kind of Skype interviewing with distillers in the United States. And, Balcones gave me a really sweet offer and flew me down. I was in the States for Thanksgiving, and they flew me to Waco, and kind of like we hung out, and I got drunk in their tasting room. I was really so excited to be there. I drank like all their special releases. I was just like so in awe because I knew about them, and I've been following them for a couple of years. And it's kind of one thing led to another. And then I just started in the brew house. I worked, an early job in our brew house, mashing and milling and forklifting. Then I worked my way into the distillation team. And then I managed the distillation team, and then I worked my way into the blending team, and now I manage the blending team and the people who manage the distillation team. And so, it's been I've been here almost 6 years.
Wow.
That's how I did. I only know, that's the other caveat too, is like, I'm sure you guys have very illustrious guests on your show, and you've had people who've been, a lot of different distilleries and know a lot and a lot of different paradigms. And my paradigm is Balcones because that's where I was trained. So
yeah, no, I mean, that's awesome. And then Einsprecher ist Deutsch bitte?
No, ein bisschen. Yeah, my German's like so bad, man. I'm sorry. It was terrible.
No, it's fine. I just figured I'd go with it.
A1. Yeah, that's pretty terrible.
No, it's I took it in high school, and I can like get around and ask where the bathroom is, and like most people can in Spanish. But the good thing is German is a English speaking country, so we're good. Oktoberfest is on the list.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome though. Like just like being able to transition careers, but also grow, right? I think sometimes people think like, hey, these people that are at the high end of their whiskey companies, like you had to be in there 30, 40, 50, 60 years, a la Jimmy Russell or Eddie Russell, right? Like you got to get like there's people growing in the industry very quickly, especially in emerging markets. Like you all are, ahead of the curve in American single malt.
Yeah, no, it would be a lot harder. I mean, yeah, if I'd moved to Kentucky, I might still be, in the brew house or mashing or whatnot, or, I think it'd be just another path, that you could do. I get the sense that they're kind of a little different, it's like you study chemical engineering, you study food science, and you can kind of get on the blending R&D path, or like you're just maybe an hourly employee, you just kind of like cut your teeth for a really long time.
Yeah.
In production.
Grind it out.
But I don't know. I worked for Balcones, so.
No, that's awesome. So, Scott, I see is over here, testing out, the limited release that's coming. That's, in September. So the blue corn, what's the B stand for?
Yeah, we're calling this
Blue Corn Bourbon.
Yeah, Blue Corn Bourbon. Yeah, we're calling this. We're not giving it a name like its own expression name. It's just going to be wine finished Blue Corn Bourbon. There
we go. Keep it simple. I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Like, yeah, don't do anything if you don't have to. The thing I noticed about this right off the bat, because it is finished in other casks, is the color is extremely dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little garnety, a little russet.
Yeah, very dark, very dark amber.
Yeah, so I know y'all might want to talk about the whiskey first. Talk about the flavors.
No, I mean, like talk to us about like how did you come up with the cask that you all wanted to use for this? Because Texas whiskey is such a distinct flavor, and then the Blue Corn Bourbon is even more distinct. Like, how did you come up with this? Like getting to where this finishing barrels? Well,
it's a hair meandering, but really we've been we talked about with the WHY recipe, that experimental yellow corn wheated bourbon recipe, that we're using these large casks, these 500-liter casks, and so that's in our kind of American style whiskey program, bourbon and rye. But in our malt program, we've also recognized, hey, if we put malt into a really big cask, we can cut the evaporator loss, way down. And we can also balance the oak extractives over this larger volume of spirit. And so we've been exploring that. So we've been getting in these 500-liter, 4, 5, sometimes 6. We just got a round of 700-liter punch-ins to like really big casks from France and from predominantly from the West Coast. We got a small run from France just because they're some of the only ones who can make casks that big, 700-liter. But we're trying to wean ourselves off of foreign oak sources. So these wine casks from the West Coast are perfect. So we were getting these in, and then we got some that just had such a heavy wine character that we didn't really want to put malt into them right away. We were worried that it would kind of overpower the Texas malt. We didn't really know how the cask would behave. So we knew we had this scheduled Blue Corn Bourbon release, and we thought, okay, well, we'll just like blend these lots of Blue Corn Bourbon and marry them into these large format wine casks. And Blue Corn Bourbon for us, obviously from the blue corn, it's getting a lot of earthiness and nuttiness and richness and oiliness. But from our cooperage program, it does about 80% American oak, but about 20% virgin French oak. And so it gets these velvety, very long tannins. that also blend itself very well to the wine cask that it's in. So yeah, that was kind of the idea behind it. It was like me going, I want to get these large casks in for malt. Okay, we'll put bourbon into it first, because that way no one will give me a hard time. So yeah, that's kind of how this was born. And we just threw them in and we kind of crossed our fingers and we're like, hopefully this works. And after a couple months, I think it has. I think it's actually panning out. It's not quite done yet. This is actually a single barrel from the lot of puncheons that we're blending together. One of our blending assistants, Emma, picked this out for y'all. This is her favorite. It's a Grenache cask.
And what's the proof point on this one?
So the proof that you were drinking at is it's a 120, so 60% ABV. So it's pretty high. I mean, that's just we didn't proof it down for you or anything. That's just the cask. That's the cask strength proof.
I would have never said it was 100
of this cask.
Like personally, I would have said somewhere around 100, 110. And I think that's the misnomer. Like I'm expecting all Texas whiskey to be like dragging, breathing mouth fire.
Yeah.
Because I've had some that have done that. Yeah.
And I think that's, that's one of the differences between us and I think some other Texas producers. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Iron Root.
Yeah.
In north of Texas, I think a couple of years ago, what was it, 2020 or 2019, they won World's Best Bourbon at the Icons of Whiskey Awards. But yeah, they have a Vendome pot. We do pot distillation as well.
Yeah.
So that pot distillation, even though, yes, it's a little bit younger whiskey, it's a fierce climate, it's extracted a lot of tannin and spice from the barrel in a short period of time, especially in a bourbon, which is going into virgin oak, where there are a lot of extractives. But it also is pot distilled. So there's all these lipids and oils that kind of like coat your mouth and protect the membranes in your mouth and your taste buds a little bit from really being hit with the full power of that alcohol. Again, I was kind of saying, if you brought a Kentucky, Indiana style industrial column here and you put it into a very young 6-month yard age barrel with a simple char on it and then tried to drink it at 2, 3, 4 years old and wanted something that tasted good, it might not fit the bill, only because a younger whiskey is going to be a little hotter, a little fiercer. So we kind of, again, our climate is really intense. How can we partner with our climate? Okay, let's retain all the lipids from these raw ingredients we're using instead of cutting them out in the distillation process.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
So getting back to this ex-Grenache cask, it just has like a ton of strawberries and like peach, like lots of fruit that jumps out of the glass.
Yep.
And to think that it's 120 proof, it doesn't drink like that at all, which is super surprising, as Jake mentioned. But
yeah, a lot of that fruit is, I don't know if you all have had our previous releases of Blue Corn Bourbon. It's a very sturdy, nutty, rich, pretty dry whiskey. So yeah, the hope was that those wine casks would bring in some of those soft dried berries, some of the velvety, lusher, plummy tannins from the cab, which is it's half Grenache and then it's half cab of the puncheons that we got. For at least this, we have a lot of other puncheons, but we decided to use the Grenaches and the cabs for this.
The note that I get on here is maple syrup, like on the nose, like real mapley.
Yeah.
And then that plum.
Yeah, I agree.
Like that plum shows up at the end, but that maple note, which I didn't expect, like on cab casks or Grenache casks, like I wouldn't have expected either of those notes to show up. Plum, maybe yes, because of the red wine, but like the mapleness, I wouldn't have expected at all. So that's what I think is super nice is that first up front, like you're not overtaken by the blue corn, right? You're overtaken by it's like, hey, this is maple. You can get into this, and then there's some of those stone fruit notes that everyone loves.
Yeah, we do love our stone fruits in our Balcones single malts, though. That's kind of our hallmark.
Well, and the drying effect and like the jamminess on the finish is really nice on these.
Yeah, no, definitely jammy. That's one of our blending assistants, Emma, loves so much about this one. The Grenaches have that very fresh, jammy fruit flavor. The cabs tend to be like a lot more tannic and a little more serious, a little more acidic and tight.
Yeah.
But these Grenaches are very lovely.
Well, and like the last cab finish I had was super dry. This isn't as dry. Like this has body, right, and characteristics, but it's not dry. So it's not like zapping your palate. Like you want to go right to a glass of water.
No, yeah, you're not running for relief. You kind of, give it a second, give it 10, 15, 20 seconds. Then you want to go in for a little more.
Yeah, definitely. So we just had this experimental release that's coming, right? We had a single barrel of that release. There's two cool things that we could go with. So I'm going to let dealer's choice, because we're getting close to an hour, and we don't want to, make our listeners have like 5 trips back and forth to the office to listen to this whole podcast. We have the rye, the 100% rye, which is experimental, only 16 months old, or we have Balcones Big Baby. Gabe, I'm going to let you pick. Dealer's choice. Where are we going?
I don't know. Y'all did a review of Big Baby, so I can't decide which one would be more fun. My name's on the back of Big Baby, so I'm familiar with it. I feel good about it.
So Big Baby it is.
Baby.
Let's do Big Baby,
and we can have you back to talk about the rye.
I wrote the review on Big Baby.
Let's do it. Yeah, Big Baby. So little backstory. We used to use 5-gallon barrels for most of our production. This is way back in the day. We haven't had a filled 5-gallon barrel in our warehouse system probably since maybe 2018. We dumped them all. So anyways, that's that. But back in the day when we were sourcing our 5-gallon barrels, we were getting them from a supplier in Mexico, which we didn't talk about back then. I don't know why. But they were actually taking refurbished tequila casks, cutting them down to size, and re-toasting and charring them in these little 5-gallon barrels. And so the initial kind of run of Baby in the early days, and a lot of our stuff had this kind of like agave thread to it because of these refurbished 5-gallon barrels. So when we moved up to our standard size barrels, full size barrels, which are 225 liters for us, we laid down Baby Blue in a fair amount of tequila casks because we wanted to make sure we could kind of still have that flavor, that vegetal nature, that salinity that the tequila offered to Baby Blue. Some of those casks we didn't actually end up using all that many of them. Baby Blue blend might get 2 or 3 casks or 1 or 2 casks of the tequila, but not 10, 20, 30. So long story short is we had some that sat around for a really long time. This release, Big Baby, got the bottle here. I'll show it to you. Full size one. It's a 5-year bottle and bond, 100% roasted blue corn whiskey, matured entirely in used tequila casks. And yeah, I love it. It's very expressive. It has that butterscotchy kind of semi-vanilla profiterole like body of the roasted blue corn. But also it has these really great notes of minerality and salinity. There's a little watermelon rind to it as well. Definitely fresh and very fun and refreshing and kind of citrusy. There's a little lime zest to it as well. So yeah, we've been encouraging people to mix this in cocktails and kind of treat it like you would a reposado or an añejo, and try to have a good time.
That was the thing I noticed.
And it's bottled and bond.
Yeah, Scott's second favorite thing. Corn whiskey and bottled and bond. The saltiness, the salinity, as you mentioned, that was the note that I picked up right on the nose. That was the cool thing. I like tequila, and I like añejos and reposados. Don't really care for blancos. The saltiness in the lime just made me think of tequila and a margarita right off the bat. Yeah, and
it's a little bit maybe not fully in keeping with our identity of big, burly, monstrous whiskeys. A lot of our corn profile got really big for a long time. We had Baby Blue, then we had True Blue 100, and then True Blue cask strength, and then True Blue 100, and Brimstone as well as roasted blue corn whiskey. And aside from Baby Blue, these are pretty big, burly, leathery, dry whiskeys. Brimstone is smoked with Texas scrub oak. It tastes like a campfire. It tastes like brisket. It's very intense. So I think part of the idea of doing Big Baby was just doing something a little more playful, kind of a riff on, hey, this is what Baby Blue would be if you gave it 5 years in tequila. And it's actually really fun and engaging. And also it's Texas and it's 105 degrees for 120 days. So why the hell would you want a cask strength, leathery, dry whiskey when you could throw this in a ranch water? It was kind of more the vibe. And we've been doing a lot more of that as a distillery is, on our whiskey journey and on our own personal maturation journey of just maturing as whiskey makers is, you kind of come out the gate, you guys know, people want cask strength, want these big, stupid, obnoxious things. They want the next big, crazy thing, the next big, crazy finish. Now that we've been in it almost 15 years, we're definitely feeling a little more hey, we actually might need to drink this. We actually might need to sit down on a really hot summer day and enjoy this somehow. So what would it look like to make a whiskey where it could still be super fun and different, but we could do that? And so that's kind of how this was born.
Yeah. I mean, salt the rim of a glass, throw some ice in the glass while you're waiting. 1 ounce simple syrup in here with 2 ounces of this and a fresh squeeze of lime and a shot of Grand Marnier. You got yourself a margarita. And you don't even need like any other mixture. Like,
no, you don't need simple, I don't think. Yeah,
it drinks just like a margarita. Like you could do without the simple syrup. I just like mine extra sweet, but like it'd be super easy to make a marg out of this. And I love me some just Grand Marnier just in general. So I'm putting that in every margarita I ever drink. But this is wild but good.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah, we have so this was 5 years, so we did it and then thought, oh man, it'd be great to do this again, but we're gonna have to wait a while. But last year we laid down almost 100 roasted blue corn whiskey new make into ex-mezcal casks. So some mezcal casks they were previously they were French Bordeaux wine casks, and then they got mezcal for like a year. So we laid down a bunch of those, and so that's kind of like could potentially, and that's a huge tease. I haven't told anyone that, but that could potentially be the next big baby kind of on schedule. But yeah, it won't be till 2026. So somewhere around there. We could do a cask strength release a year earlier, and not have it be bottle and bond. But I don't know exactly what we're going to do. But that's kind of the vibe is, and definitely our roasted blue corn too. We're experimenting with different corns in our lab here. We're actually running a pink like heirloom corn from east of Mexico City, like a real traditional Mexican corn designed for tamales and masa. So we're still continuing to experiment with a lot of Southwestern corn varieties and dipping our toe in there. And when we do that, we want to partner with Central American producers. We want to get tequila casks, mezcal, Mexican brandy casks, because we feel like there's a lot of affinity for where our region sits with those flavors, especially given our climate and the heat. So expect to see more of that as we kind of develop as a distillery.
Yeah, I know.
So the name Big Baby, is that just because,
Gabe's a big baby?
It grew up? Is that
a little bit. Yeah, it's higher proof, it's older. Yeah, that's kind of, it was, honestly, that was our working like R&D title for it. It was like, oh yeah, we should check on the big baby. Yeah, check on the big baby. And that was like my name for it. And then when push came to shove, we were like, okay, well, we should release this. What are we going to call it? And I was like, we're calling it Big Baby. And our head distiller, my boss, Jared, was like, okay, but you put your name on the back of the bottle because I don't want my name on the back of a bottle. It says Big Baby. It's like, fine. So it was a little bit of a game, but yeah, that was the idea. It just meant to be playful. I think it's fun. It's oddly
whiskey.
Yeah, it's odd enough that like one of our biggest sellers is a corn whiskey that's called Baby Blue. It's like, oh, we're Balcones, we make Texas whiskey. Try our Baby Blue. It's in a teal bottle. It's like it's very not. It doesn't really mix. So it was just more of that vibe.
I mean, I think the whiskey's gotten better as we've gone on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just saying. I think.
Oh, thanks,
whiskey,
Jake.
Yeah, no, it's each of these things have gotten a little bit better. And what you all have built on. And yeah, this Big Baby is something unique that I think people need to get their hands on.
If the listeners haven't read our review, I wrote that review on vacation about a month ago, and yeah, it woke me up. And
where were you on vacation?
Super unique. Down in Florida. I was at Miramar Beach. Yeah, Destin.
That fits the vibe a little bit. It was going to be a bummer if you were like on an Alaskan cruise.
No. I was sitting out back by the pool one evening after the long day at the beach and stuff, and poured it. I think I even had a cigar that night. So
oh, nice. Yeah, I've done it. I've done it with a kind of a Connecticut wrapper with like a little lighter cigar. It works.
Yeah.
No, it was. You got to go read the review, but yeah, it definitely woke me up, and I don't typically drink tequila, so.
There's a salty spiciness to it, right? So it's like you get the salinity and you get the lime up front, and then there's like a little spice kick at the end, right? You get that bite at the end, which is really kind of the hook, right? Like that makes you come back to more. It's almost like you have like a little tahini in there. That's a very Texan thing. I feel like.
I mean, again,
Talking about tahini.
Yeah, no, definitely. I just before I hopped on, I made a margarita at home with the tahini rim, you know?
Yeah, for
but
sure.
yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely got that vibe. I don't know how. I feel very lucky to have pulled it off too. I feel like there was a time 5 years ago when we filled these, they were just giving tequila casks away for nothing. And you could get really nice casks. Like it wasn't that much more to get like an extra añejo versus a reposado, you know? And so we got some really great casks with really great character. Honestly, the tequila casks that we've gotten the last couple of years have sucked. They've just been, I don't know, I don't want to shit on anyone, but they've just been from really major producers in America that made it down to Mexico for a couple months and then came back, and like they're super black peppery and vegetal and not really citrusy or nuanced or fruity in any way. So that's been a real bit, and they're twice the price of the cask we tried to get 5 years ago, and really hard to get. And so, yeah, it's going to become a bit of a game where it's going to be more about relationships and going down there and building a relationship with someone and saying like, hey, like we'll give you our casks. Can we get them back? And so it'll be a little bit of a different game going forward to do stuff like this. But I think that's good. But
I think you're up for the challenge though.
I mean, yeah, agreed with that one. And it's going to be like the rum craze, right? Like go fill your thing in X rum, let it age for 15 years in rum, and then you get that cask back and do something crazy with it when you get it back. Right. People are going fangirl over rum cask right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
Gabe,
they really are, man. It's like taking off. I mean, they'll age anything in rum.
Yeah. Oh, it's asinine. So Gabe, we really appreciate you joining, as we close out here, cause we've covered a lot of ground in an hour, really. In all honesty, you've been efficient with us through this process. Where can people find out more about just Balcones and what they have coming up for Bourbon Heritage Month?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do would be to follow us on Instagram, Balcones Distilling. That's our national account. We also have, if you're in Texas or you're interested in what's going on at the distillery, we have a Balcones Waco account that does more like events that are happening on site, single barrel releases, that kind of stuff. Or if there are any limited front of house special releases, it'll happen on the Balcones Waco. But yeah, really Instagram would be the best place. You could subscribe to our newsletter on our website, balconesdistilling.com. And you could also find us on Facebook as well. Those are probably the best spots to follow along. I know that our Blue Corn Bourbon release that's happening at the end of Bourbon Heritage Month will be a pretty decent volume release, and it should go to national distribution. It might take 30, 60 days to get there. So it might not actually start making it out to those markets until maybe in November. It'll be substantial, and a decent amount will be made available to e-commerce as well through our website. And so you'll be able to get your hands on that one. So yeah, I mean, I would just follow us there and stay alert for when we're doing stuff through Bourbon Heritage Month. And we really appreciate folks, you all taking the time and to talk to us and kind of shine a little spotlight on what's happening in Texas with Texas Whisky and with Texas Bourbon. I guess to close, I would just say, yeah, I mean, we're trying to be humble, and we're trying to put ourselves in perspective and understand that this is a really long game. It's a very old industry. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of tradition behind it. And we're trying to be reflective on the fact that like, we're not going to solve this thing overnight. And I think showing the lineup that we did, instead of just coming right out the gate and saying like, this is our finished pot still bourbon, you're going to love its Texas-sized flavors. We're like, well, actually, like, there's a little nuance to it. We have our own uncertainties and we're on a path, and I think that's most producers in Texas just going like, man, this is hard.
Yeah.
So what can we do to kind of wrap our heads around it? And instead of thinking we're going to make the best bourbon in the country right away, just go, we'll probably be dead before the best Texas bourbon is made. And that's okay. It's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really appreciate you all giving us the time. It's been really fun.
We truly appreciate it. And we're super excited to, really partner with you all to, be the first kickoff to Bourbon Heritage Month. And we have a long line of things going on that month, but we really appreciate, the time today. And this podcast, again, will drop the week of September 1st. So we're really excited about that. Again, make sure you go check out Balcones Distilling on Instagram. And, I'm sure you can just Google Balcones and get all the information you ever needed. If you want more information about the Bourbon Lens, go check out Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Bourbon Lens. We'd also really appreciate it if you go to your favorite podcast listening app, smash the subscribe button, and then give us a 5-star review if you so choose, as well as a comment. We'd greatly appreciate it. And last but not least, if you want exclusive experience, go over to patreon.com/Bourbon Lens, and you can get exclusive tasting experience, information about what we have going on. We have virtual hangouts. We just want to get to know the whiskey community. So if you are interested in that, go over to patreon.com, again, /Bourbon Lens to find out more. And until next time, cheers.